I was walking towards my local shopping centre today, and two girls in front of me, young women, I guess late teens, early 20s, hard to say, but quite young, younger than me anyway, were just walking ahead, and one of them had a cigarette, and she just chucked it behind her. And it didn't hit me, but I looked at the ground, and it was clearly still lit. It was like the stub. And I thought that was just a reminder of how stupid some people in society really are and how selfish. Um, and before people get put off by the negative tone here, there will be a positive caveat to this. But I do want to express this a little bit because, particularly during this pandemic, we've seen people being particularly obnoxious in some ways, refusing to wear masks. And I'm not talking about people doing it for medical reasons or even because they believe it's all they get into conspiracy theories that it's all hoax. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people who just think it's, oh, they don't have to, because it's, oh, let's just be a little bit cool. Let's just be a little bit rebellious and not wear it. And, it is, I've seen some teenagers with that mindset, and I emphasize some. The contrast to that obviously is there's other young people who are working really hard, um, with the studies, and they've just been screwed over by this government algorithm. I have enormous sympathy with them. Um, but you get other young people who are volunteering who are so I'm not one of these people that say, oh, all young people are the same. Um, but yeah, there are some very selfish people in society, and I think it's kind of been exacerbated by the pandemic, but I think signs of this beforehand as well. Now, the thing about the cigarette is that's not just messy, it's actually potentially dangerous. Disasters have been caused by cigarettes. Um, and I sort of regretted that I didn't say something to her. What would I have said? I don't know. I had my mask on, but I would have said, hey, that almost hit me, or what? I let it go. Maybe I shouldn't have. But I overheard the same two girls later on saying, "Oh, let's try and get in without the mask," and just you could tell they were just being idiots. I think public transport tends to attract these sort of people, um, and I don't think this is gender or age specific. Sometimes we assume that it's just young people, but I've seen older people as well, well into their 40s and 50s, behaving like this, and even older. Um, like I say, public transport tends to attract it. Maybe I have mild anxiety because I do find it. I find myself getting a bit anxious getting on public transport. Thinking, is some drunk yob going to get on? For international viewers, yob is a British colloquialism. It just means a kind of obnoxious person who thinks they could do what they want. Aggressive, obnoxious person. Um, I mean, there's nothing more off-putting on public transport than a loud bore. Sometimes they're drunk, sometimes they're not. I mean, they don't always have to be drunk. Sometimes they just don't care about the fact the rest of the carriage can hear their voice. I remember once being on a train and this guy had one of those loudspeaker phones. I was actually smiling and he was talking to whoever he was talking to, and the whole carriage could hear him. And it's not that he was being aggressive or anything. It's just that it's very distracting having to listen to someone else's conversation. And, I didn't have headphones. It's not like I could just turn off. And he didn't seem to really care. I really don't have respect for people like this. It's just boorish. It's just obnoxious. And you might think, some people might say it's a trivial thing. I'm not so sure that it is because, like I said, I've got mild anxiety, but I have a friend who suffers serious anxiety. And so that sort of thing, someone talking loudly. would make him quite anxious. Um, someone suddenly shouts for no good reason, things like that. So I really think that there needs to be a degree, and I'm careful about how I'm saying this, a degree of stigma towards those people because they need to know that the rest of us are tired of it. And I think the law needs to reflect that in the worst cases. I'm not talking about people talking on public transport. In that case, they should be, kind of shamed or something. But I'm talking about, like, in the most serious cases, when you get someone getting drunk 30,000 feet, I think the law really needs to throw the book at them. And I was really disappointed in a recent case, a young woman from Wigan. I've quoted this a few times, but I think it's relevant. She got drunk. It's not just that she was mouthing off; she was actually she physically assaulted the airline staff. The other passengers had to put up with her. This was a flight from the UK to Turkey. I guess that's about 3 hours or 4 hours. She was mouthing off, assaulting airline staff. The judge, because she was a single mother, the judge decided to give her a community sentence, even though she'd actually assaulted staff. Now, to me, that should have been a mandatory custodial sentence, whether she was remorseful or not. To send out the message that that sort of thing just cannot be tolerated. Because it's bad enough on a train, but when you are literally in an enclosed tube in the air, there's nowhere else where the passengers can go, where the other passengers can go, where the staff can go. I think there's a number of factors that can minimize this. I thought about the idea of kind of plain clothes air marshals. I suppose the difficulty there would be, there'd be legal issues if they went overboard. But I do think there should be a situation where if you have a violent passenger, airline staff have the legal power to restrain them within reason if they are being really obnoxious. Because you can't have a situation where someone's trying to barge into the cockpit, for example. I mean, to me, that is little better than terrorism because maybe they are drunk out of their mind and they don't know where they are, and it's a very serious situation. And I think that requires a serious answer. So I do think that if not airline marshals, then at least empower airline staff to have power of restraint or something like that. Um, so it's something I think should be seriously looked at. But another thing would be when you have flight delays, you have the airline bar or the airport bar. It just keeps you get the worst is like hen parties and stag parties where they just tank themselves up. And men and women are as bad as each other. They tank themselves up, then get on a flight drunk out of their mind and behave that way. So I think there should be a limit on how much people can drink in airport lounges. Okay, I get it. If your flight's delayed, it's frustrating. We've all been there, but it's no excuse for getting blind drunk. Um, you know, in that case, there should be some compensation or something from the airline. But it's not an excuse for getting drunk and being boorish towards other people. Anyway, having said all this, so okay, there's selfish people in society, and it's not just that it impacts other people, it stresses people out. People who suffer anxiety, it really makes things hard for them. Um, say for example, a soldier who is suffering PTSD, or anyone suffering PTSD for that matter, and they have to, they're trying to rebuild their life, and they're walking down the street minding their own business, and some obnoxious person yells across the street just for no reason. I don't think it's necessarily that all of these people are bad people. I think it's just that they're selfish. They're just thoughtless. And they need to really know and understand what sort of impact that can have on others. Certainly, I think in some cases it's down to parenting, but not always. But one thing's for sure, I don't think that society should tolerate it. I think people in a position of authority, for example, shopping center security personnel, etc., the wider public need to support people like that to do their job. And at the risk of going off on a tangent here, I think we need to be sympathetic to the police. I recently saw a report where the police, particularly in London, whenever they make an arrest, they immediately have this situation where people will gather around, and particularly if it's a black suspect, and assume it's racism. Now, maybe this is more for another video, but sometimes we just have to accept that we don't know the whole story. So I have a lot of sympathy with people in a position of authority trying to do their job. I have no sympathy for those who abuse their position. They should be investigated and held to account. But those who are just trying their best to do their job, and it's a difficult and stressful job, I think we need to sympathize with them. Um, but selfish people need to be shamed because it's the only way they've any chance of changing. Maybe when they're younger, they'll mouth off and say, "Oh, I could do what I like." But if society sort of turns a blind eye and say, "Oh well, we better not raise an issue about that," then that will only embolden them. I honestly believe that. Okay, I mentioned that I didn't want this to be overtly negative. So the positive thing to this is that for every selfish person, who thinks that society's rules don't apply to them, there are many other decent people. There are many caring people. There are many kind people. We've seen that with the fantastic work of frontline NHS staff. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think they really have shown the best of us this year. Um, and not just NHS staff, also carers. I mean, carers really are unsung heroes. Um, but there really are a lot of decent people out there, and that is the caveat. There are probably, I like to be optimistic and say there's probably more kind and decent people than there are selfish and stupid people out there. Now, the reason I mentioned stupid, incidentally, is I think the two are often closely tied. I'm not talking about people with learning difficulties, okay? So I'm not being callous about this. I'm talking about people who are just willfully ignorant. There's people with learning difficulties who can be very kind-hearted. You can tell they're decent people, but they just, struggle with some things. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what things particularly bug you. But I would want to close with an optimistic note. Like I said, there are a lot of good people out there, and that's something to hold on to. So when we get frustrated with the selfish people, let's remember that there are also lots of good people, and they show the best of human nature.